The rain at the cemetery felt less like water and more like ice shards trying to pierce through my black wool coat. It was a fitting sensation, I suppose. The numbness in my fingers matched the hollowness in my chest. My mother, Martha Sterling, was being lowered into the wet Virginia earth, and the only thing I could focus on was the mud splattered on the toe of my father's Italian leather shoe. I stood there, Greta Sterling, 38 years old, the invisible pillar of the Sterling family, watching the mahogany casket disappear. I wasn't crying, not yet. I had cried myself dry in the hospital waiting room 3 days ago. Now I was just empty, a shell waiting for a direction. My father, Robert Sterling, stood to my right. He looked impeccable.
Not a hair out of place. His suit tailored to hide the paunch of a 68-year-old man who loved scotch more than his children. He was dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Beside him was my brother, Brad, the golden child, 40 years old, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, likely to hide a hangover or the dilated pupils of whatever substance was getting him through the week. I leaned in slightly, needing to feel a connection, needing to hear a word of comfort from the only family I had left. "We need to list the lake house immediately," Robert whispered. He wasn't talking to me. He was leaning past me, speaking to Brad. "Before the market dips in the fall." "Yeah," Brad muttered, checking his watch, and the portfolio. "We need access to Mom's liquidity. I have debts." My stomach turned, literally twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might vomit right there on the grave. Mom wasn't even cold yet. The priest was still muttering about ashes and dust, and they were liquidating her assets. "Can we at least wait until the service is over?" I whispered, my voice cracking. Robert snapped his head toward me, his eyes cold and hard behind his rimless glasses. "Don't be dramatic, Greta. Life goes on. Business goes on. Your mother would want us to be pragmatic." Pragmatic. That was Robert's favorite word for selfish. The ride back to the estate was silent. The Sterling estate was a sprawling mansion that I had maintained for the last decade while building my own career in the shadows. I drove my modest sedan behind their limousine. When we pulled into the driveway, the house loomed over us, dark and imposing. I just wanted to go to my room, curl up in the sheets that still smelled like the lavender detergent Mom used, and sleep for a week. But when I walked through the heavy oak front doors, I saw the suitcases. 2 of them. My suitcases. They were sitting in the center of the grand foyer, looking pathetic and small against the marble floor. I stopped, the keys falling from my hand with a loud clang. "What is this?" Robert walked past me, pouring himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the side table. He didn't even look at me. "Brad needs the master suite now. And since I'm taking the guest wing for my office, we need your room for Brad's things." "He's moving back in." I blinked, trying to process the logic. "My room? Dad, I live here. I pay the utilities. I handle the landscaping. You stayed here to care for your mother," Robert cut in, taking a sip of the amber liquid. He finally turned to face me, and the look on his face wasn't grief. It was annoyance. "She's gone, Greta. Your function here has expired." "My function?" I felt the air leave the room. Brad chuckled from the couch, kicking his feet up on the coffee table, something Mom never allowed. "Don't make it weird, Greta. You're almost 40. It's pathetic you're still living with Daddy anyway. Go find a husband or something." "I stayed because Mom had cancer," I screamed, the anger finally breaking through the numbness. "I stayed because you," I pointed at Brad, "were too busy gambling away your allowance in Vegas. And you," I pointed at Robert, "were too busy playing CEO to drive her to chemo." Robert set his glass down with a sharp clink. The room went silent. He walked over to me, looming over my frame. He smelled of expensive cologne and decay. "You are a guest in this house," he hissed, "and you have overstayed your welcome. This property, the company, the assets, they belong to the men of this family. That is how the legacy works. Your mother isn't here to protect you anymore. She isn't here to whine about fairness." He kicked one of my suitcases toward the door. It spun and fell over. "Get out," he said calmly. "Tonight. I don't want to see your face at breakfast." I looked at them. My father, with his sneer of absolute authority. My brother, with his smirk of unearned victory. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just the help. I didn't scream again. Something inside me clicked shut. A heavy iron door closing on 38 years of hoping for their love. I picked up my keys. I grabbed the handles of my bags. "You're right," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "Mom isn't here, but neither is the person who kept your secrets, Dad." I walked out into the rain. Thank you so much for being here with me right at the start of this journey. It's hard to relive this, but I know I'm not alone. Please, take a moment to comment below and tell me which city you're watching from. I'd love to know where my support is coming from today. I drove through the blinding rain, my windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. Eventually, instinct took over, and I found myself pulling into the driveway of Sarah, my best friend since college. Sarah didn't ask questions. She took one look at my soaking wet hair and the suitcases in my trunk, and she opened a bottle of wine. She set up the guest room, gave me a dry, oversized t-shirt, and let me sit on her floor and stare at the wall. As the adrenaline faded, the memories flooded in. The unfairness of it all wasn't new. It was the foundation of my life. For the last 10 years, I had been the shadow architect of Sterling Designs. The world thought Robert Sterling was a visionary and that Brad Sterling was the up-and-coming genius. But anyone who actually looked at the blueprints knew the truth. I remembered a night 5 years ago. It was 3 a.m. I was in the studio at the estate, my eyes burning from staring at CAD software. I was designing the Metro Plaza complex, a project that would eventually win the firm the Golden Beam Award. Brad was supposed to be the lead architect. Brad was currently passed out on the leather sofa in the corner of the office, smelling of tequila. He hadn't drawn a single line. "Greta," Mom had whispered, coming into the room with a cup of herbal tea. She looked so tired back then, even before the cancer. She placed the cup near my hand. "You need to sleep, honey." "I can't, Mom," I said, not looking up. "The deadline is tomorrow. If this isn't done, the firm loses the contract. If we lose the contract, Dad says he'll have to lay off staff." "Your father says a lot of things," Mom said softly. She brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Why do you do it? Why do you let Brad put his name on your work?" "Because we're family," I recited the line Dad had drilled into me since childhood. "The name on the building doesn't matter as long as it's Sterling." Mom had looked at me with such profound sadness then. "One day, Greta, you will realize that you are the Sterling that matters. And when that day comes, I want you to be ready to burn it all down to build something new." At the time, I thought she was just being poetic. Mom was always reading mystery novels and talking about karma. I didn't know she was planting seeds. I thought about the salary. That was the other knife in my gut. As a senior architect, unofficially, I should have been making 6 figures. But Dad kept me on the payroll as an administrative consultant. I made $45,000 a year. "It's for tax purposes, sweetheart," Robert would say, patting my shoulder. "Besides, you live at home for free. You don't have expenses. We're putting the extra money into the trust for the future, for all of us."
I believed him. I was so desperate for his approval, for him to look at me the way he looked at Brad, that I accepted the crumbs. I let them use me as a human ATM of talent. I produced the work, they took the credit and the cash. And Brad? Brad made $250,000 a year as Vice President of Vision, a title that meant he attended lunch meetings and flirted with the receptionists. Sitting on Sarah's floor, hugging my knees, the realization washed over me. It wasn't just about money. It was about worth. To them, I was a utility, like a toaster or a lawnmower. You don't love a lawnmower. You use it until it breaks, and then you throw it out. I had broken. Or rather, my reason for existence, Mom, had broken. And so I was discarded. They think I'm weak, I whispered to the empty room. Sarah poked her head in. What was that, hun? They think I'm weak, I said louder. Dad thinks because I never fought back about the money or the credit that I don't have it in me. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but my hands were steady. I walked over to my purse and pulled out my laptop. What are you doing? Sarah asked, leaning against the doorframe. I'm checking something, I said. Before Mom died, she told me to memorize a specific date. She said if anything ever happened, I needed to talk to Arthur. Arthur Pendergast? Your family's lawyer? Mom's lawyer, I corrected. Dad uses the firm's legal team. Mom always kept Arthur on a separate retainer. She said he was the only man in Virginia who didn't owe Robert money. I opened my email. There was nothing there. But then I remembered Mom's paranoid habit. She used drafts. We shared a login for an old email account we used for recipes. I logged in. I went to the drafts folder. There was one email, saved 3 days before she went into the coma. Subject line, recipe for lemon tart. I clicked it. It wasn't a recipe. My dearest Greta, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are checking this account, it means your father has done exactly what I feared he would do. I know him, Greta. I know his greed, and I know Brad's incompetence. I have spent the last 2 years dying, but I have also spent them planning. Do not cry for me anymore. It is time to work. Call Arthur immediately. Tell him the code word is hydrangea, and bring the large safe key hidden in the false bottom of my jewelry box, the one I gave you last Christmas. The war has started, my love, and I have given you the ammunition. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision again. But this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of relief. Mom hadn't left me unprotected. She had left me a weapon. The next morning, the grief was a heavy blanket, but the anger was a hot cup of coffee cutting through it. I dressed in the most professional suit I had, a sharp charcoal blazer and trousers. I wasn't going to the estate. I was going to the office. I needed my files. If I was going to war, I needed my portfolio. Not the fake one Dad showed clients, but the raw files, the metadata that proved I was the creator of the Sterling legacy. I pulled into the parking lot of Sterling Designs at 8 a.m. The modern glass building, which I had helped redesign 3 years ago, glinted in the sun. I walked to the front entrance, my badge ready. Beep, red light. I frowned and swiped again. Beep, red light, access denied. My heart hammered against my ribs. Surely he hadn't moved this fast. It had been less than 12 hours since the funeral. Miss Sterling? I turned to see Gary, the security guard I had known for 8 years. I used to bring him coffee on my late nights. He looked miserable. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Gary, my badge isn't working. Can you buzz me in? I can't, Miss Sterling, Gary stammered, looking down at his shoes. Mr. Sterling, your father, he sent a memo out at 6 a.m. Termination of employment effective immediately. He said you were unstable. Unstable? I let out a sharp, disbelief-fueled laugh.
I designed this lobby, Gary. I know, ma'am. I'm sorry.
He said if you showed up, I was to ask you to leave or call the police. I stared at him. The betrayal wasn't from Gary. He was just a guy trying to keep his job. It was the thoroughness of Robert's cruelty. He wanted to erase me. Through the glass doors, I saw movement in the lobby. Brad was walking through with a group of junior architects. He saw me standing outside. He stopped. He smiled. It was a slow, oily smile. He tapped his wrist where his Rolex sat, then pointed to the parking lot. Go away. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was the sound of a cable finally shearing under too much tension. I didn't bang on the glass. I didn't scream. I just nodded at Gary. It's okay, Gary. I'm leaving. I walked back to my car, sitting in the driver's seat. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Unstable. That was their narrative, the grieving daughter who lost her mind. It was smart. It discredited anything I might say later. I pulled out my phone and dialed Arthur Pendergast's number. Pendergast Law, a receptionist answered. This is Greta Sterling, I said, my voice eerily calm. I need to speak to Arthur. Tell him I have the hydrangea. There was a pause, and then a click. Greta, Arthur's voice came on the line. It was deep, gravelly, and reassuring. I've been waiting for your call. Where are you? I'm in the parking lot of the company I built, getting kicked out like a trespasser. Don't go back there, Arthur commanded. Don't engage with them. Robert is trying to provoke you. He wants a public scene to bolster his claim of your mental instability. Do not give him the satisfaction. I have the key Mom mentioned, I said, the one in the jewelry box. Good. Meet me at the First National Bank on 4th Street in 1 hour. Not my office. Robert has eyes everywhere. Arthur, I asked, hesitating, is it bad, the will? Arthur sighed. The will is complicated, but your mother was a brilliant woman, Greta. She played the long game. Just get to the bank. I hung up. I looked back at the building one last time. I saw my father's silhouette in the window of the corner office, my office, technically, though he sat in it. He thought he had won. He thought the game was over because he held the king and the queen. He didn't realize Mom had been playing a completely different game. She was playing chess while he was playing checkers. I put the car in reverse. The sadness was receding, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect, and I was about to redesign their entire reality. The vault at First National Bank was cold and smelled of old paper and dust. Arthur Pendergast stood beside me as the bank manager slid the heavy metal box onto the viewing table and left us alone. Arthur looked older than I remembered, his gray hair thinning, but his eyes were sharp. Your mother came to me 2 years ago, Greta, the day she got her diagnosis. She told me she was going to yoga on Tuesdays, I murmured, touching the cold metal of the box. She was coming to me. She was terrified for you. She knew that once she was gone, Robert's restraint would vanish. She knew about the emotional abuse, the financial manipulation. She knew everything. I inserted the key Mom had left me. It turned with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid. Inside, there wasn't money. There were documents, stacks of them, and a small black USB drive. What is all this? I asked. This, Arthur said, pointing to the first stack, is the truth about Sterling Designs. I picked up the papers. My eyes widened as I scanned them. They were loan documents, massive ones. Robert is leveraged to the hilt, Arthur explained. The company is hemorrhaging money. He's been taking out loans against the company assets to pay for personal liabilities. Brad, I realized. Brad's gambling. I flipped to the next section. Copies of wire transfers.
$50,000 to the Bellagio, $100,000 to a shell company in the Caymans, $75,000 to a luxury car dealership. Robert has been draining the company to cover Brad's debts for years, Arthur said. That's why he never paid you a fair salary. He literally couldn't afford to. The company is a house of cards, Greta. The only thing holding it up is the revenue from the projects you design. I felt sick. All those times Dad told me we had to be tight with the budget. All those times he denied me a raise. He was funding Brad's addiction. But that's not the worst of it, Arthur said, gesturing to the USB drive. Your mother installed hidden cameras in the house 6 months ago, in the office. In the living room. She spied on them? She gathered evidence, Arthur corrected. She wanted proof of their character. She knew Robert would try to cut you out of the will, and she knew that in the state of Virginia, a will can be contested if there is proof of undue influence or coercion. He pulled out a laptop and plugged in the USB. The video player popped up. I clicked a file dated 2 weeks ago. It was my father and Brad in the study. Mom was visible in the background, sitting in her wheelchair, looking frail and barely conscious. Video Dad. Just sign the amendment, Martha. It simplifies things. Greta doesn't have the head for business. We're doing her a favor. Video Mom. No, Greta, she gets half. Video Brad. Mom, stop being difficult. You're going to die anyway. Do you want the company to fail? Greta will run it into the ground. She's a drafter, not a leader. Sign it. On the screen, Robert grabbed Mom's hand, her shaking, thin hand, and forced a pen into it. He physically guided her hand across the paper. There, Robert said on the video. Done. Now go back to sleep. I slammed the laptop shut. I was shaking. Violent tremors ran through my body. He forged it. He forced her. It's coercion, Arthur said grimly. But it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. Robert filed that specific will this morning, the one where he gets everything. He thinks it's ironclad. But with this video, we can destroy him in court, Arthur said. But court takes years, Greta. And Robert has expensive lawyers who will drag this out until the money is gone. Your mother knew that too. That's why she created the trap. The trap? Arthur pulled out a sealed envelope from his briefcase. This is a secondary document, a codicil to her personal trust. The trust that holds the life insurance policy and the original family land deeds. Assets Robert couldn't touch because they were in her name only. How much is it worth? $45 million, Arthur said calmly. I gasped. I thought we were broke. The company is broke, Arthur smiled. Your mother came from money, Greta. Old money. She kept it separate. Robert has been trying to get his hands on it for 40 years. So who gets it? That depends, Arthur said, tapping the envelope. This document has a conduct clause. It's a trigger. It states that the inheritance is split 50-50 between you and Robert unless what? Unless Robert or Brad commits an act of extreme familial cruelty against you within 30 days of her death. If they do, if they kick you out, if they publicly humiliate you, if they deny you support, the split changes. Changes to what? 100% to you, 0% to them. My mouth fell open. Does Dad know? No, he thinks the trust just rolls over to the surviving spouse automatically. He has no idea this codicil exists. I sat back in the chair, a slow smile spreading across my face. It was a cold smile. He kicked me out last night, in the rain. We need proof, Arthur said. Did anyone see it? Just them. It's my word against theirs. Arthur nodded. Then we need him to do it again, publicly, irrefutably. We need him to hang himself with his own arrogance. I looked at the documents again. I looked at the gambling debts. Oh, he will, Arthur. The gala is on Friday, the unveiling of the Green Tower. The Green Tower project? Arthur asked. The one they're betting the company's future on? Yes, I said, my mind racing, and I know something about that project that they don't, something that's going to make Friday night very memorable. Good, Arthur said, closing the briefcase, because on Friday, we aren't just contesting a will, we're executing an eviction. I spent the next 2 days at Sarah's house, turning her dining room into a war room. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but I pushed it down. I had a job to do. I needed more than just the video of the coerced signature. I needed to know their current moves. I needed eyes inside the house. I called Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins had been our housekeeper for 20 years. She was a stern woman with a soft spot for Mom and me. Robert treated her like furniture. He spoke freely in front of her because he didn't think she was important enough to listen. She answered on the first ring. Miss Greta, oh, thank heavens, are you all right? I saw the suitcases. I'm fine, Mrs. Higgins, I'm safe, but I need your help. Mom said I could trust you. Your mother was a saint, Mrs. Higgins whispered, and that man is a devil.
He had a woman over here last night, the night after the funeral. My blood ran cold. Linda? Yes, that blonde secretary. They were in the library drinking your mother's vintage wine. Mrs. Higgins, listen to me carefully. Did Mom give you a small gray device, like a recorder? She did. She told me to keep it in my apron pocket whenever Mr. Sterling was drinking. Did you record them? I did, she said, her voice trembling slightly with the thrill of rebellion. I have it right here. They were talking about you. Can you play it for me? Hold it to the phone. There was a fumbling sound, then a click, and then my father's voice came through the speaker, distorted but unmistakable. Recording. Robert. Finally got rid of the dead weight. But Robert was moping around like a wounded dog. It was depressing. But Robert, what if she sues? Doesn't she own the designs? Greta, please. She doesn't have the spine. Besides, Brad registered the copyrights in his name last week. We backdated the forms. She can't prove a thing. Once the Green Tower funding comes through from Elias Thorne, we'll have $200 million. I'll buy you that villa in Tuscany. And I can finally pay off the guys in Vegas. They're getting aggressive. Just keep your mouth shut until the gala. We present the tower, Thorne signs the check, and then we're untouchable. If Greta shows up, I'll have security toss her out on her ass. Make a show of it. Let everyone know she's crazy. Mrs. Higgins stopped the tape. Thank you, Mrs. Higgins, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You are a hero. I need you to give that tape to Arthur Pendergast. Can you do that? I'll walk it over there myself on my grocery run, she promised. I hung up and stared at Sarah. They backdated the copyrights, I said. They stole my work, legally. Sarah poured me a glass of water. So what do you do? If the paperwork says it's Brad's, how do you prove it's yours? I walked over to my laptop. I opened the encrypted folder that held the source code for my designs. Architecture isn't just drawing lines anymore. It's math. It's physics simulation, especially for a project like the Green Tower, a 60-story eco-friendly skyscraper with a vertical forest. The structural load calculations were a nightmare. I had spent 6 months writing a custom algorithm to balance the weight of the soil and trees against the wind shear. Brad couldn't do long division without a calculator. There was no way he understood the algorithm. They stole the files, I said, typing furiously. They have the PDFs and the 3D renders, but they don't have the math. What does that mean? It means I left a back door, I said. Mom warned me. 2 years ago, when she first got sick, she told me, always keep a key they can't copy. So, in the Green Tower source file, deeply embedded in the foundation layer, I put a watermark. It's digital DNA. I pulled up the code.
There it was, buried in the stress test simulation parameters. Property of Greta Sterling. If found, please return to the real architect. But that wasn't the best part. Sarah, I said, a dangerous idea forming. The gala is a live demonstration, right? They're going to run the wind tunnel simulation in real time to impress Elias Thorne? That's what the invitation says, a live test of the future. If they run the simulation using the stolen file, I can control it. Control it how? I can trigger the fail state, I whispered. I can make the tower collapse, on screen, in front of everyone. But that destroys the project, Sarah said. It destroys the company. The company is already dead, I said, thinking of the gambling debts. Robert killed it. I'm just going to bury the body. I looked at the calendar. Friday, 2 days away. I need a dress, I said. Something that says, I'm not the victim. Something that says, I'm the executioner. Friday evening arrived with a suffocating humidity. The gala was being held at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. The ballroom was decked out in green and gold, the colors of the Green Tower project. I arrived in a limousine I couldn't really afford, but Arthur insisted it was a necessary expense. Optics, Greta, you enter like you own the place. I wore a black dress, not a funeral dress, a revenge dress. Sleek, off the shoulder, sharp lines. My hair was pulled back tight, no jewelry except for Mom's simple pearl earrings. Arthur met me at the entrance. He looked dapper in a tuxedo. Are you ready? He asked. I'm terrified, I admitted. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Good. Use it. Remember what they did. Remember the suitcase in the rain. We walked in. The room went quiet. Not silent, but that distinct drop in volume that happens when a scandal walks into the room. Heads turned, whispers started behind champagne flutes. Is that her? I heard she had a breakdown. She looks fine to me. I saw Robert across the room. He was holding court with Elias Thorne, the billionaire investor. Robert looked like the king of the world, laughing, gesturing. Brad was beside him, looking nervous, sweating through his expensive shirt. When Robert saw me, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Then his eyes narrowed. He whispered something to Brad, then marched toward me. What the hell are you doing here? Robert hissed, keeping his voice low but venomous. I told you to stay away. It's a public event, Dad, I said, keeping my voice level, and I'm a shareholder. Mom left me her shares, remember? You have nothing, Robert spat. The will is being probated. You are a trespasser. I want you out. I'm just here to see the presentation, I said, stepping around him. I hear the Green Tower is quite a marvel. Robert grabbed my arm. His grip was painful. Don't test me, Greta. I will have you dragged out. Let go of me, I said loudly. Heads turned. Robert released me, smoothing his jacket. Security is on standby. One wrong move, one word, and you're gone. Don't embarrass me in front of Thorne. He walked back to the stage. I found a spot near the back, next to the audiovisual booth. Arthur stood silently beside me, checking his watch. He's agitated, Arthur noted. Good. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Robert walked up to the podium, beaming. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, thank you for joining us to witness the future. Tonight, Sterling Designs unveils a masterpiece, a legacy project. He gestured to Brad, led by my son, the brilliant Brad Sterling. There was polite applause. Brad walked up, looking like he was about to throw up. And tonight, Robert continued, we are honored to have Mr. Elias Thorne here. With his partnership, the Green Tower will redefine the skyline.
Elias Thorne, a man with sharp features and even sharper eyes, nodded from the front table. "But first," Robert said, his voice taking on a somber tone, "I must address a personal tragedy. As many of you know, we lost my beloved Martha this week." He paused for effect. A fake tear glistened. "And sadly, the grief has been too much for some. My daughter, Greta," he gestured vaguely toward the back of the room, shining the spotlight on me. I froze. He was doing it. He was doing exactly what he threatened. "Has been struggling with severe mental health issues since the passing. She is here tonight against medical advice. If she causes a disturbance, please forgive her. We are getting her the help she needs." The room gasped. Everyone gasped. Everyone looked at me with pity and fear. He had just painted me as the crazy, unstable daughter, publicly. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. But then I felt Arthur's hand on my elbow. "He just slandered you," Arthur whispered. "Strike one." "Now," Robert said, clapping his hands, "let's see the simulation." The massive screen behind him lit up. The 3D model of the green tower appeared. It was beautiful. It was my design. Every curve, every beam. "Brad," Robert said, "walk us through the wind shear test." Brad stepped to the laptop on the podium. Yes, so as you can see, the aerodynamics are, very good." He pressed a key. The simulation started. Wind lines began to hit the tower. I pulled out my phone. I had remote access to the cloud server where the file was hosted. "Ready?" I whispered to Arthur. "Do it." I pressed enter on my phone. On the big screen, the simulation suddenly flashed red. Error. Structural integrity compromised. Unauthorized user detected. Initiating copyright protection protocol. The audience murmured. "What is this?" Robert hissed at Brad. "Fix it." I don't know," Brad panicked, smashing keys. "It's locked." On the screen, the beautiful tower began to wobble. The text changed. Architect, Greta Sterling. Status, unpaid, uncredited. Outcome, collapse. And then, on the giant 4K screen, the green tower crumbled into a pile of digital dust. The ballroom was dead silent. The image of the collapsed tower and my name glowing in bright red letters hung over the stage like a judgment. "What the hell did you do?" Robert roared. He wasn't whispering anymore. He forgot the microphone was still on. His voice boomed through the speakers. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You sabotage. Security, get her out of here. Get this crazy bitch out of here right now." The crowd gasped. The profanity, the rage, the mask had slipped completely. 2 security guards started moving toward me, but Elias Thorne stood up. "Wait," Thorne said. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded authority. The guards stopped. Thorne looked at the screen, then at Robert, and finally at me. "Mr. Sterling, why does the simulation say the architect is Greta Sterling? You told me Brad designed this." "It's a glitch," Robert shouted, sweat pouring down his face. "She hacked the system. She's trying to ruin me because I cut her off." Robert marched down the steps of the stage, storming toward me. He looked ready to hit me. "You ungrateful little parasite!" Robert screamed, standing inches from my face. "I gave you a roof over your head. I let you play pretend architect. And you do this? I am the owner of this family. You are nothing. You are disowned. Do you hear me? I want you dead to this family." Arthur Pendergast stepped in front of me, blocking Robert. "That's enough, Robert," Arthur said calmly. "Get out of my way, Arthur. You're fired too." Arthur checked his watch. He looked at the stunned crowd.
He looked at the cameras that were live streaming the event. "Actually," Arthur said, his voice projecting clearly, "you can't fire me, and you can't disown her. Because as of," he checked his watch again, "30 seconds ago, you are no longer the owner of the Sterling estate or assets." Robert blinked, confused. "What are you babbling about?" Arthur reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. The codicil. "Ladies and gentlemen," Arthur announced, turning to the room, "my name is Arthur Pendergast, executor of the estate of Martha Sterling." "This is not the time," Robert yelled. "It is exactly the time," Arthur countered, "because you just triggered the retribution clause." "The what?" "Martha Sterling left a specific instruction," Arthur said, holding up the document. "She knew her husband was prone to outbursts, so she added a condition to the $45 million trust." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. "The condition states, if my husband, Robert Sterling, attempts to evict, publicly humiliate, or disown my daughter Greta within 30 days of my death, he forfeits his entire share of the inheritance." Robert's face went pale, ghost white. "You just did all three," Arthur said dryly, "on a microphone, in front of 300 witnesses." That's not legal," Robert stammered. "It is perfectly legal," Arthur said, "and I have the video evidence of you forcing Martha to sign the fraudulent will last week. Would you like me to play that for the room next, or should we save it for the police?" Robert staggered back, clutching his chest. Brad was frozen on stage, looking like a deer in headlights. Elias Thorne walked over to me. He ignored Robert completely. "Ms. Sterling," Thorne said, "did you design the tower?" "I did," I said, my voice steady, "and I can fix the simulation, because I know the math." "Prove it," Thorne said. I pulled out my phone. I entered the administrator password, Mom's birthday. I reversed the fail-state code. On the big screen, the rubble reassembled itself. The red text vanished. The tower stood tall, swaying gently in the virtual wind, perfect and stable. Architect, Greta Sterling, remained on the screen. Thorne nodded. He turned to Robert. "Consider our deal terminated, Robert. I don't do business with frauds." He handed me his business card. "Call me on Monday, Greta. I want to build your tower." The unraveling was swift and brutal. Robert tried to lunge at me. "You set me up, you witch!" But this time, the security guards didn't grab me. They grabbed him. "Mr. Sterling, you need to calm down," the lead guard said. "Get your hands off me. I own this building." "Actually," Arthur interjected, "the building is owned by the trust, which is now 100% owned by Greta, so technically you are trespassing." I looked at my father, the man who had terrorized me, belittled me, and used me for decades. He looked small, pathetic. "Greta," he gasped, changing tactics instantly. "Greta, baby, please, don't do this. We're family. I was stressed, the grief." "Stop," I said. It was the first time I had ever interrupted him. "Just stop." Then the doors at the back of the room opened. Detective Vance, whom Arthur had called, walked in with 2 uniformed officers. They walked straight to the stage and handcuffed Brad. "What? Hey, get off me!" Brad squealed. "Bradley Sterling," the detective said, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and identity theft." "Dad!" Brad screamed. "Do something!" But the officers were walking toward Robert, too. "Robert Sterling," Vance said, "we have a warrant for your arrest regarding the falsification of a legal will and elder abuse." The words elder abuse hit the room like a bomb. The video Arthur mentioned, the one of him forcing Mom's hand, had already been sent to the DA. As they dragged Robert away, he locked eyes with me. He didn't look sorry. He looked hateful.
"You'll never be anything without me," he screamed. "You're just a shadow." I watched him go. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not for him, but for the father I wished I had, the father who never existed. "I'm not a shadow," I whispered. "I'm the light." I know this is intense. Watching the people who are supposed to love you get taken away in handcuffs, it's a mix of satisfaction and heartbreak. If you're still with me, if you're cheering for Greta, please hit that like button and comment the number 1. Let me know you're on the side of justice. Your support keeps me going. The morning after the arrests, the Sterling estate didn't feel like a home. It felt like a crime scene, which, legally speaking, it now was. The police had finished their initial sweep, but the yellow tape was still fluttering in the driveway like a tattered flag of war. I stood in the foyer, the same spot where just days ago my suitcases had been kicked across the marble floor. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating. For 38 years, this house had been filled with the booming voice of my father, the whining complaints of my brother, and the quiet, suffering sighs of my mother. Now it was just me and the hum of the refrigerator. Arthur Pendergast arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, accompanied by a team of 3 forensic accountants. They weren't there to design buildings. They were there to deconstruct the lie my father had built. "Greta," Arthur said, his voice gentle but businesslike, "this isn't going to be pretty. We have the court order to seize all physical and digital records. We need to understand exactly how deep the rot goes before the creditors come knocking." "Tear it apart, Arthur," I said, clutching a mug of coffee that Mrs. Higgins had wordlessly pressed into my hands. "I don't want to live in a house of secrets anymore." The process took 3 agonizing days. We set up a command center in the dining room. As the accountants dug through the hidden safes, the offshore shell company records, and the deleted emails, a picture emerged that was far worse than simple gambling debts. It was a systematic erasure of my existence. On the second day, a young accountant named David called me over. He looked pale. "Miss Sterling, you need to see this." He handed me a ledger bound in black leather, found taped underneath the bottom drawer of Robert's desk. It wasn't financial. It was a log of intellectual property transfers. I scanned the pages and my breath hitched in my throat. 2018, the Metro Plaza design transferred to Brad Sterling. 2020, the Riverside Eco Park transferred to Brad Sterling. 2022, the Horizon Bridge transferred to Brad Sterling. Next to each entry was a note in my father's distinct, jagged handwriting. "Greta, submission rejected by client. Resubmitted under Brad's name. Approved." "He lied," I whispered, the paper trembling in my hands. "He told me the clients hated my work. He told me I had no eye for modern aesthetics. He said the only way to save the contracts was to let Brad fix them." "He didn't just steal the credit," David said softly, pointing to a column on the right. "He stole the royalties. Look at these licensing fees." Millions. Over the last decade, my designs had generated nearly $12 million in licensing fees alone. Money that should have been mine. Money that could have bought me a house, a studio, a life. Instead, it had gone into the Sterling Boys Trust, a fund used to pay for Brad's sports cars, Robert's mistresses, and their lavish golf trips. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to sit down. It wasn't just greed, it was malice. My father had actively gaslit me into believing I was mediocre, all while getting rich off my genius. He needed me to feel small so I would stay in the dark, churning out gold for him to mine. But the physical evidence in the study was even more devastating. I decided to clean out the old safe in the library wall, the one Dad claimed was broken for 20 years. Arthur had brought a locksmith.
When the heavy iron door finally swung open with a groan of rust, it wasn't empty. It was filled with unopened envelopes. I pulled them out, sitting cross-legged on the dusty Persian rug. The dust motes danced in the shaft of light coming through the heavy curtains. Massachusetts Institute of Technology Admissions Office, Cornell University Scholarship Committee, Zaha Hadid Architects Internship Offer. My hands shook as I tore open a letter from 2008. It was an acceptance letter to a prestigious master's program in London, full tuition covered. I remembered that year. I remembered waiting by the mailbox every day, hoping, praying. I remembered the look on Robert's face when he told me, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. No letters came. Maybe you aimed too high. You know you're not academic material. You're better off here, helping the family." He had intercepted the mail. He had stolen my education. He had stolen my youth. I didn't scream. I think I had passed the point of screaming. A cold, hard stone formed in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just a bad father. This was a monster who had cannibalized his own child's future to feed his ego. "He was afraid," Mrs. Higgins said from the doorway. I hadn't heard her come in. She was wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes red. "Afraid of what?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Afraid that if you ever realized how brilliant you were, you would leave him," she said, walking over and placing a hand on my shoulder. "And without you, he was nothing. He knew it. Brad knew it. Your mother knew it." "Mom knew about the letters?" I asked, terrified of the answer. "She suspected," Mrs. Higgins said, "but she couldn't find them. That's why she started recording. That's why she built the trap. She told me once, 'Greta thinks she is the moon reflecting my husband's sun. She doesn't know she is the sun, and he is just the dark cloud blocking her light.'" I hugged the stack of stolen letters to my chest and finally wept. I wept for the 22-year-old girl who thought she wasn't good enough. I wept for the years I spent seeking validation from a thief. But the grieving period didn't last long. It couldn't. That afternoon, the front door chime rang. It was Linda, my father's mistress. She was standing there in a tight dress, looking frantic, holding a box of personal items. "I need to get into the guest wing," she demanded, trying to push past Mrs. Higgins. "I left my jewelry there, and Robert promised me the painting in the hallway." I walked into the foyer, still holding the forensic report. "Linda," I said calmly. She stopped, looking me up and down with disdain. "Ugh, Greta. Look, this is a mess. Just let me get my things and I'll go. I don't want to be involved in your little family drama." "You are involved," I said, signaling to the security guard Arthur had hired. "Your name is on the forensic report." "The consulting fees paid to you from the company accounts? That's embezzlement. You knowingly received stolen funds." Her face went pale. "Robert gave me that money. I didn't steal anything." "Ignorance isn't a defense when you're spending money laundered from a fraudulent trust," I said, my voice steady and cold. "The police have been notified. I suggest you get a lawyer instead of worrying about your jewelry." You can't do this," she shrieked. "I was the only one who made him happy." "You were an expense," I said, turning my back on her, "and I'm cutting costs. Get off my property." Mrs. Higgins stepped forward, folding her arms. "You heard the lady. Move along." As Linda was escorted out, screaming obscenities, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't happiness. It was power, the clean, sharp power of setting a boundary and defending it. I looked at the mess in the dining room, the piles of paper, the evidence of decades of abuse. "Arthur," I said, walking back into the command center, "burn it down, metaphorically speaking. I want to sue for everything. The back wages, the intellectual property, the emotional distress. I want his prison commissary account empty. Arthur looked up over his spectacles and smiled, a rare, shark-like smile. I was hoping you'd say that. We just found the offshore accounts in the Caymans. We can repatriate the funds by Monday. Good, I said, picking up a pen, because I have a company to rebuild, and this time the foundation is going to be solid. 3 weeks later, I walked into the headquarters of what was formerly Sterling Designs. The sign out front had been removed, leaving a ghost-like outline of letters on the brick facade. It was fitting. The old era was gone. I wasn't wearing my usual beige cardigan or the oversized slacks I used to hide in. I wore a tailored navy suit, heels that clicked with authority on the marble floor, and my mother's pearl necklace. The lobby was silent. The staff had been in limbo since the arrests. They looked terrified as I walked in. They expected a purge. I called an all-hands meeting in the main atrium. I know you are worried, I began, my voice projecting without a microphone. I looked at the faces of the junior architects, the drafters, the receptionists, people who, like me, had been underpaid and overworked while Brad bought sports cars. Robert and Brad Sterling are not coming back, I stated flatly. A ripple of nervous energy went through the room. The company is insolvent. The accounts have been frozen. I saw shoulders slump. People began to whisper about unemployment. However, I continued, raising my hand, I have capitalized a new venture using my personal inheritance. This firm is being dissolved. A new firm is being incorporated today. I motioned to the screen behind me. The new logo appeared. Clean, modern, organic. Martha and Greta Architects. I am offering everyone here a choice, I said. If you were part of the corruption, if you helped cook the books or covered for Brad's incompetence, you will find your severance packages at the door. Security will escort you out. We know who you are. About 10 people, mostly middle management cronies of my father, shifted uncomfortably. For everyone else, I smiled, a genuine, warm smile. For those who actually do the work, I am offering you a new contract with a 20% raise immediately and full credit for every line you draw. We are going to build the Green Tower, and we are going to do it right. The silence held for a heartbeat, and then applause broke out. Not the polite golf clap of my father's galas, but real, relieved, enthusiastic applause. Gary, the security guard, gave me a thumbs up from the back. But the hardest part of the reconstruction wasn't the office. It was the closure. I had to see him, one last time. The state penitentiary was a world of gray concrete and fluorescence buzz. It smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. When the guard brought Robert into the visitation booth, I almost didn't recognize him. Without his tailored suits, his hair dye, and his expensive moisturizer, he looked deflated. He was just an old, angry man in a jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He sat down, picking up the phone receiver. He glared at me through the thick glass. "You look pleased with yourself," he rasped. His voice had lost its boom. "I'm busy, Robert," I said into the phone. "I just came to get you to sign the quitclaim deeds. It makes the seizure of the assets faster, so we don't have to drag this out in court for another 6 months. "I'm not signing anything," he spat. "I'm going to appeal. Brad was confused. I can fix this. I always fix this." "Brad took a plea deal this morning," I said quietly. "What?" "He testified against you, Dad, to cut his sentence from 15 years to 5. He told the DA everything, the forgery, the coercion of Mom, the embezzlement. He even told them about the bribes you paid to the zoning inspectors in 2019. Robert's face turned a violent shade of red. "That ungrateful! I gave him everything. I built that boy." "You built a parasite," I corrected, "and now he's doing what parasites do. He's feeding on the host to survive."
Robert slammed his fist against the glass. "I did this for you, for the family. You don't understand business, Greta. You're soft." "I'm not soft," I said, leaning in, my eyes locking with his. "I just secured the funding from Elias Thorne. Alone. I redesigned the structural integrity of the tower in 3 days. Alone. And I managed to save 50 jobs that you were about to destroy. I am not soft, Robert. I am efficient." He stared at me, his chest heaving. For the first time, I saw it. The fear. He realized that the narrative he had spun for 40 years, that I was useless and he was a god, was a lie. And the person he had underestimated was the one holding the keys to his kingdom. "Why?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "Why destroy your own father?" "You fired me," I said simply. "Remember? In the rain. You told me to find somewhere else to die. I'm just following your advice, Dad. I found somewhere else to live." I slid the papers through the slot. "Sign them or don't. The judge will grant the order either way. This just saves you legal fees you can no longer afford." He looked at the papers. His hand shook. Slowly, defeatedly, he picked up the pen. As I walked out of the prison into the bright, blinding sunshine, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. A collect call from the county jail. "Incoming call, Bradley Sterling." I looked at the screen. I thought about the times he mocked my clothes. I thought about him stealing my awards. I thought about him standing on that stage, taking credit for my life's work. I pressed the decline button. I blocked the number. There are some things you can't rebuild. Some foundations are too rotten. You have to bulldoze them and plant a garden over the ruins. I got into my car. "To the site," I told the driver. "We have concrete to pour." The grand opening of the Martha Sterling Tower, formerly the Green Tower, took place on a crisp October evening, exactly 1 year and 2 days after my mother's funeral. The sky was a deep, bruising purple, fading into twilight. The tower itself was a marvel of glass and vertical gardens, spiraling up 60 stories like a beanstalk reaching for heaven. Every balcony was draped with hanging ivy. Every floor had its own microclimate system. It was alive. It breathed. It was the first building in the city's history to be fully carbon neutral, and it bore the name of a woman who had been silenced for too long. I stood on the podium. This time there was no fear, no shaking hands, no father looming over my shoulder ready to correct me. There were 500 people in the audience, investors, press, and my new team. Elias Thorne stood beside me. "It's magnificent, Greta," he said quietly. "Your mother would have loved it." "She does," I said, touching the locket around my neck. "I can feel it." I stepped up to the microphone. The lights were blinding, but I didn't squint. "Thank you all for coming," I began. My voice was strong, echoing through the plaza I had designed. Architecture is often seen as a pursuit of ego. We build tall things to say, "I was here." We want to scrape the sky to prove we matter. I paused, looking out at the crowd. I saw Sarah in the front row, wiping tears. I saw Mrs. Higgins, dressed in her Sunday best, beaming with pride. "But this tower is different," I continued. "This isn't a monument to ego. It's a monument to truth. It stands on a foundation of resilience. It was built not just with steel and glass, but with the courage of a woman who planned for a future she knew she wouldn't see." I pulled a small, worn piece of paper from my pocket. "When I was cleaning out my childhood home," I told the audience, sharing a piece of my soul, "I found a box. It contained 53 letters. Letters my mother wrote to me during the 2 years she was dying of cancer. She hid them because she knew if she gave them to me while she was alive, my father would have destroyed them." The crowd went silent. "I want to read you a passage from the very last letter.
The one she wrote the day before she passed. I unfolded the paper. My hands were steady. My dearest Greta, you have spent your life trying to shrink yourself to fit into the small box your father made for you. You think your silence is a shield, but it is a cage. When I am gone, the lock will break. Do not be afraid of the noise you will make. Scream if you have to. Break things. But promise me one thing. You will never, ever let a man take credit for your magic again. You are the architect of your own joy. Build a skyscraper, my love, and live on the top floor. I folded the letter. I looked up, tears finally spilling over, but they were happy tears. I whispered into the mic. I cut the ribbon. The applause was thunderous, a wave of sound that washed away the last lingering ghosts of the past. Later that night, after the champagne had been drunk and the guests had left, I went up to the penthouse. It was my private residence now. The view of the city was breathtaking. I walked out onto the terrace. The wind was cool. I looked down at the city lights, a grid of electricity and life. I thought about Robert, sitting in his cell, probably telling his cellmate about how he used to be a king. I thought about Brad, facing a future where he actually had to work for $1. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like reading about a tragedy in a history book. They were my past. This was my future. I realized then that the trap Mom left wasn't just the money. The $45 million was nice, certainly, but the real trap was the truth. She knew that if she gave them enough rope, enough freedom to be their worst selves, they would hang themselves. She trusted in their greed more than she trusted in their love, and she was right. But she also trusted in me. She trusted that when the walls fell down, I would be the one standing in the rubble, ready to pick up a brick. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the jasmine I had planted on the terrace. I wasn't Greta the shadow anymore. I wasn't Greta the victim. I wasn't even Greta the daughter. I was Greta Sterling, architect, CEO, survivor, and I had a lot more building to do. They say the best revenge is living well. I disagree. I think the best revenge is succeeding in the exact way they said you couldn't. My father spent 30 years telling me I had no business sense. Last month, Forbes put me on their cover as the turnaround CEO of the year. He has a subscription in the prison library. I hope he reads it. But my story isn't just about revenge. It's about waking up. There are so many of us, especially women, who are trained to be the peacekeepers. We absorb the pain so others don't have to. We make ourselves small so others can feel big. We work in the shadows so others can shine. If you are listening to this and you feel like you're waiting for permission to step into the light, stop waiting. No one is going to give you the microphone. You have to take it. Check the accounts. Read the fine print. Trust your gut when it tells you something is wrong. And most importantly, listen to the people who love you, the really love you, not the ones who just need you. My mother left me a legacy of love, wrapped in a legal hand grenade. It saved my life. But you don't need $45 million to change your story. You just need the courage to say no more. To say, I am worth more than this. To say, I built this. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me until the very end of this story. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth, justice, and resilience. You are strong, you are capable, and you are not alone. See you in the next story.